Ladies and gentlemen, today I am here to predict everything that will ever be added to Merge Tactics forever for the rest of time. I want to guess it all. Because if all goes well, this list should hold up for the rest of eternity. It should be the comprehensive. We'll never need another list. This is our first and our last. So, next week when the new update comes out to Merge Tactics, you guys are all going to stare up at me in awe and wonder and go, wow, he's a genius. He predicted it all. So yeah, that's what I'm expecting to happen. So you guys can like throw the roses and gold coins now, just like to prepare. Shout out to the live studio audience who is here in chat today. If you want to be a part of a recording like this, show up. Be glad to have you. And of course, I'll be addressing the elephant in the room, the huge teaser Supercell dropped today on multiple socials that discusses the future of Merge Tactics. Big stuff today, guys. Big stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to change the music and we'll get into it. Dude, I freaking love that song. The song from Squad Busters. Anyways. Dude, I'll get to it. No spoilers, chat. No spoilers. Here we go. Alrighty. There are two roads that Supercell may take to expand the beautiful game of Merge Tactics. As I see it, there are two roads. Whoops. There's the road you might call the light, chill, easy, relaxing, straightforward road. And there's the dark, evil, foreboding, terrifying, scary road. Those are the scientific names. I like to call them the easy road and the hard road. The easy road, in this case, would be to... Okay, I need to stop doing that. The easy road in this case would be to expand. To flesh out the world that we as a Merge Tactics community have painstakingly built. Well, I say we. It's like a royal we. Like, I mean, I didn't do any of the development or have any say in anything, but, like, I helped. I emotionally. There are two wolves inside. Okay. You guys are distracting me. So yeah, that's the first road, and it involves this table that's here on the left side. I will explain that very soon. But the other road, the dark... Dude, I need to stop touching the wrong stuff. The dark, scary... Whoops. The dark, scary... Gosh dang it! I'm sorry. The dark, scary road here on the right is the expansion into the new world. Expanding into new traits, new cards... new mechanics, reworks, scary stuff. No, not the pay-to-win route. It's expanding into creativity, taking chances. And I'm going to take some chances on some out-there predictions today, so please bear with me. But first, we need to talk about the graph. This is what I like to call a trait table. I put this one together today, but you can find similar ones all over the place. There's one on the Merge Tactics wiki that I based this one off of. There's a bunch everywhere. There's some like really aesthetic ones people have made, but I like this one a lot, and I'll explain to you why. The way this works is the primary traits are on the top. Those are like the meteor, like this is where you came from. In the balance changes, they actually called them originally origin traits, which that's cool. And those are on the top. And then on the left are secondary traits. It's also on the right, by the way. I cut it off, but you'll see in a second. On the left is secondary traits or profession traits, like basically what your job is. Like here, what's a good example? The Valkyrie doesn't look at herself as a juggernaut. The juggernaut is just what she does. It's not her identity. Her true people are her clan brethren. Okay, this analogy is kind of a struggle, but you get the point. Anyways, to explain why I like this type of visual representation so much, which is saying a lot because I made my own Merge Tactics Gominos, find them for free in my YouTube page. But I like this one a lot for a very simple reason, and I'm going to show that to you. I'm going to zoom in here on the top right, see where the witch and stuff is. Boom. There we are. Anyways, the best part about a representation like this is you can easily see these gaps here in the troop pool, basically the opportunities for expansion. Like, say right now, there is no noble Avenger in the game. There's not a single one. Think as hard as you can, you'll never figure it out. There's none. You cannot think of one, I guarantee you. And there is no undead blaster. Of course, there used to be. Rest in peace, Bomber. Shout out. Anyways. So, the reason this is so interesting to me is because the easiest, most straightforward way to expand the troop pool and add to the game is by filling in these slots. So in my prediction, I am going to start out by trying to fill all of those slots. That's how I'm going to start out. I'm going to fill those slots with troops from Clash Royale, because those are the most likely for my predictions to be right and for me to look like a genius. So, the reason I think this is so interesting, back to the table for a second, my grand vision is for every slot in mergetactics troop pool to be, okay, that was to be filled. Whoa. Because imagine the comp building world that we would live in with traits like this. If there was any trait you needed, any troop combination you can imagine, it would be at your fingertips, able to round out any comp you wanted to build so easily. Is it realistic? No. The thing is, there's gonna be more troops added, which I'm gonna get to later. There's a trait that we already know is probably coming. But there's gonna be more. There's gonna be expansion. So they're probably not gonna fill all of this out at any point, much less before they add more troops and make it more complicated. But there is a lot of gaps to be filled. Some of them are gonna be stretches by me. I'm not gonna lie, but it's fine. I'm going to do my best, and hopefully I'll get a bunch of predictions correct. Disclaimer, there are a lot of gaps to fill, so I am going to go pretty quickly. Don't worry, it won't take that long. Yeah, it's gonna take a second, but you should still be able to follow, even if I go a little quickly, because I'm not going that deep into each of the individual traits. Some of these will be a stretch. I'm warning you right now. I don't care. I'm not going to change it. Sue me! Anyways, here we go. The first gap to be filled is Ace Juggernauts. There's no Ace Juggernauts. There's no Ace Juggernaut troop in the game right now. However, in Season 1 back in the day, there used to be one. So the first thing I'm going to do is move a troop from somewhere where it is now to somewhere else. I know, starting off on a crazy foot, but I'm going to revert a change and move the P.E.K.K.A. back to Ace Juggernauts. Crazy work doing a switch on the first one, I know. But the reason is because Ace Avengers is still open now that we move the P.E.K.K.A. And I want to make a new Ace Avenger. So the first troop I'm going to add is the Boss Bandit. Whoa. So she's the champion, obviously rounding out that repertoire. And here's my thinking with the Boss Bandit. I don't want her to be an assassin. I don't want her to be super similar to the regular bandit with the same dashing mechanics. I wanted her an Avenger, and there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, Avengers tend to be like female gendered cards. That was the trend they kind of went with. I'm not going to stick with that for every troop that I predict today, but I'm going to lean a little into it. So she's female gendered, and obviously the bandit is an ace, so it's a very good fit. Now the reason I didn't quite want her to be the same as the bandit is because I have another idea. How I would implement the Boss Bandit is as follows. When she got below a certain threshold of health, like, you know how the Queen activates her ability when she goes below certain health? When that happens to the Boss Bandit, she would dash backwards all the way to your back line. This would have a couple of uses. It would relieve your rangers if they were getting like killed by assassins or something, or if there was troops on your back line. And the other use is, if she was ever, say, like 2 or more tiles, or over 2 tiles away from an enemy, she would dash straight onto it, like super similar to what she does in regular Clash Royale. And I think that dashing back to like preserve herself mechanic and then getting dash damage would be very suitable for an Avenger. So, there's my first one. What do you mean you hate me? What? Guys, what is going on? You play Merge to avoid the Boss Bandit? I'm sorry, okay? Guys, I didn't think you guys would hate it. I thought it was a pretty good concept, okay? Guys, it's gonna be fine. Up next is Ace Mage. Now, I'm gonna come right out and say it. This is one of my weaker picks, but I have a reason for it. The vision that I'm having for the future is for the mage trait to kind of transition towards more magic trait. I don't know that they'll change the name. Mage sounds low-key tough. But I expect them to lean more into like other types of witches. Like, spoiler alert, I'm going to mention the Night Witch later as a mage troop. Like, witches and wizards is kind of what I'm aiming to include in the mage trait. And the Mother Witch, I just didn't have another place to put her. So this is a fine potential spot, though. The Hogs could be a pretty interesting mechanic with buildings coming up. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk about that later, but yeah, we'll get to that when we get to it. Anyways, next is Ace Rangers. There's no Ace Rangers yet, so what I'm actually going to do is make a bit of a crazy change. This one's a little controversial. I cannot lie. I'm going to move the Exy, who is a classic blaster since the thrower days, to Rangers. And the reason for this is I want to implement a different Ace blaster that I think fits a little better. I want to move the Hunter in as an Ace blaster. Now, he's got that, like, shotgun vibe, very similar to the Musketeer. But I thought about this a little bit, guys. I wasn't just, like, throwing things around. I wasn't just throwing things around. There was a thought process here, okay? There was a thought process. I thought it would be really interesting because if you don't know, the blaster ability, it gives you bonus range, and it makes you do more damage the farther you are away, if I remember right. So it'd be really interesting with the Hunter, who's like a spread attacker who wants to be close up, but who also has range. It would be interesting to try and balance being close to things and doing more damage compared to being far from things, keeping yourself alive, taking advantage of his spread attack, which I was imagining he had a really wide spread attack, taking advantage of that and trying to preserve his health. So, and also taking advantage of the blaster's buff. So it would be a really interesting balance to strike. I think it would be super interesting. But I did have another idea. And this idea was for when he got the blaster's trait, for his pellets to not shoot so widely, for them to be tightened up. If you've ever played Brawl Stars, Shelly is a shotgunner very similar, and she has a gadget in that game that it makes all of her shotgun pellets super tight. Like, they go in a super straight direction, so it basically improves her as a ranged unit. So that's kind of what I had in mind for that. Anyways, now we're on to Clan. Guys, again, I would like to say I'm sorry about the Boss Bandit, officially. Okay, the way Clan troops work is they like to pick a troop that's a classic from Clash of Clans. Like, a troop that's been in that game for a long time. So I thought a very natural option for a Clan assassin was the Miner, because he plays such a similar role to assassins in regular Clash Royale. You use him to snipe out rangers and stuff. Easiest pick of my life, and he's in Clash Royale, or Clash of Clans, sorry, already. So this was quite the easy pick. Something I thought could be interesting with him is since he's like able to dig in the regular game, it would be interesting to have him as an assassin, but for him to always target the backline without needing the assassin's buff. And it would also be interesting to have him like automatically pathfind next to one of your opposing troops. It could be a little overpowered though, so I don't know. Anyways, that's an interesting one for you guys to ponder. Next up is Clan Blasters. And for this one, I'm not gonna lie, I cheated a little bit, but hardly, okay? Let me justify myself. I picked the Firecracker, who, before you say it, she's technically not always in Clash of Clans. She's been in for a couple seasonal events though. And she just strikes such a blaster vibe, I feel like. And she's like, as a humanoid character, she kind of fits in with the clan troops. I thought it was a pretty solid pick. And she would work very similarly to the way she works in the regular game, with a long range spread. Alrighty. Clan Mage, I spoiled it earlier a little bit. I'm going to go the Night Witch, because she was in Clash of Clans as well. And obviously, the basics of it would be she would be a melee troop without that much health, but she would spawn bats. So she'd be similar to the Witch, but a melee troop, which is basically what she is in regular Clash Royale. But I thought of an interesting way to make her slightly better. Instead of spawning the bats around her like the witch does right now, I would have her spawn the bats in the back, like next to all the rangers, to fly up so they get tanked for more often, because the bats would have a little less health. And I was considering making her a little bit tankier, but the thing is, it's not that difficult to put other troops in front of her, I feel like, and have her be tanked for, at least for a while, because she can walk around, and that's already like a classic thing that's done in the strategy of the game at large. So I think that would be pretty balanced. Alrighty. Electric Avengers. Now this one, I will explain later, but for this one, I'm gonna pick the E-Spirit. Again, I'll get into it later. Call me crazy, but I have a thought process here. I'll explain it when we get there. For electric blasters, I was a little bit split. So I was kind of thinking that I could use a single zappy rather than 3 zappies. 1 zappy would make a great 2 elixir troop, is what I was thinking, because the boosted range would help out, because obviously the main mechanic of a zappy would be a stun, and it would be like a longer stun, and the stun would have more impact. I'll get into that later. But basically, the boosted range giving you consistent stun, it would be a pretty solid card. So I think it's pretty solid. I messed up on Spirit. I'll explain it, I swear. Did I say, did I say Avengers? Sue me, whatever. I'll edit it out. Okay. Next we have Electric Brawlers. And for this one, I picked a pretty interesting one. I picked the Sparky. Now, the thing about Sparky is it's generally gonna want to be played in the backline just because of the massive damage it does. You want to keep it alive as long as possible. So I was thinking that I could make it a brawler, but with a lot less health, because you could put it in the front and it would tank, but then people would just play it in the back. So making it a brawler but with really low health would incentivize you to play more brawlers comps, because brawlers comps give you more health, and the longer the Sparky survives, the more value it gets. So I thought that was a pretty interesting interaction. The problem is there's like so few ways for it to not be absolutely busted. I would probably have it not do splash. It would just be like a single target ranger. It would basically be a P.E.K.K.A. but long range with less health, and then you could buff it up with the brawler trait. Alrighty. Next up, we have Electric Juggernaut. This one I was very excited about, not gonna lie. Okay, call me crazy for not putting it goblins, but I went with the Goblinstein, because just the way the Goblinstein works, it's so like, it gives me such Juggernaut vibes. The way it would work is very similar to the regular game. It would spawn 2 troops. You would be putting 2 troops on the board, and they would be locked to be 2 rows apart. So you could either put the Goblinstein's monster, is that what it's called? You could put the monster in the front row and the doctor 1 row up from the back, or you could put the monster staggered back a row with the doctor in the back row. And it would have a very similar ability. After a certain amount of hits or time or whatever, it would zap up to where the goblin guy died, or if he's still alive, it would zap to him. I don't think it would do too much splash. Maybe it would just hit all the adjacent troops, so it would probably have to be a little bit of a longer charge. But yeah, I thought that was a very fun concept. I found other things to put in goblins anyways, so I decided to go with that. Also, it has like the electric zappy deals going. Anyways, now on to Electric Rangers. And for Electric Rangers, I picked the E-Drag. Something I didn't talk about, I don't think, in the presentation today is a dragon trait being added. I thought a dragon trait had a lot of potential, like to be a primary or secondary trait, and kind of moving Skelly Drags, Baby Dragon, all that stuff, and maybe a future Inferno Dragon into the category of dragons. But I didn't really include that. I just thought I would throw it in here. But I think it would be pretty strong as a ranger, because I would have the E-Drag have a very low rate of fire, and then occasionally hit an ability. So the biggest effect of it being a ranger would be hitting the ability more frequently. And the way the ability would work is it would chain through adjacent troops, I feel like, so that it wasn't too broken. Like, you don't want it skipping tiles, basically. All you? Okay. Really sniping me right now. Whatever. Next up, we've got some fun ones. Let me tell you guys, these ones were a little difficult, but I somehow managed to get troops for fire. First off, right off the bat, for assassins, Fire Spirit. I'll explain it later, I swear. Fire Avengers. I picked a very fun one for this. I picked Phoenix because I feel like she suits the role of Avengers super well with her respawning mechanic. And I think it would be really interesting to try and figure out a retargeting mechanic where when she turns into an egg, it retargets other troops. But I'm going to talk more about retargeting a little bit later on. But obviously, Phoenix is fire. Match made in heaven. Anyways, Fire Brawlers. This one, I can't even lie to you, was a struggle. I went with the Furnace. Obviously, the Furnace is a ranged troop. Okay? Obviously, the Furnace is a ranged troop. But there's no close range fire troops. I know they just reworked the Furnace, so they're not going to want to do it again. But they've already shown that they're willing to do it, like with taking the Spirit Empress from being a troop and making her a ruler. I'm just saying it's possible, okay? Sue me. Fire Juggernauts. I went with the Lava Hound. Lava Hound, fire, haha. Anyways, I thought the Lava Hound was a perfect pick for Juggernauts because that's the role that she plays in Lava Hound decks already. And also you could have a lot of fun with Lava Pups as well. I think we need more swarm stuff in the game. Call me crazy for saying that, but I mean, we also need more splash, but what with buildings coming out. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. Anyways. And finally, Fire Rangers. I went with the Inferno Dragon, but I think I have an interesting concept. Even though he's a ranger, I would like him to have a 2-tile range. There's no 2-tile range cards in the game right now. The closest thing is like the Skeleton King, who can hit 1 and 2 tiles away at once. But there's no 2-tile range cards in the game. So I think the iDrag having 2 tiles of range would be a really good balance for him being able to DPS down really tanky units if he was left on for too long. And it would make it a really interesting battle of placement to try and figure out where to place him so that he wouldn't get killed, to get the most value out of him. And then obviously the Ranger's trait would make him charge up faster, which would be very strong. But spoiler alert, I'm also going to try and work in a way to reset him. I'll get to that later. We're on to Goblins. And for Goblins Avengers, I picked a pretty interesting card for this. I picked the Suspicious Bush. Now, what I had in mind for this was, of course, instead of 2 Bush Goblins, I would have 1, because that just fits a little better. And I would have him sneak straight to the opponent's backline very, very slowly. Very slowly, so that he lasted till late in the game. That's where the kind of Avengers thing would come in. And then he would kind of jump out and attack. So we would have different utility than Assassins, because Assassins, you want to get to the backline before they can, like, for Rangers, for example, build up their multiplier. But he would have a really different utility, so I think it would be interesting to incorporate him. Next up is Goblins Brawlers, and oh man, the Goblin Brawler was the freest pick of my life. Let me tell you, I was so happy when I figured that out. Okay, most of the Brawlers in the game right now, they play more of a utility role. They're like high DPS squishy units like the Barb, or they have the Bomb like the Giant Skeleton. I imagine the Goblin Brawler is more of just a straight-up tank, and then you could buff him up and he would just tank more. But there is potential for him to be added in his cage form. We'll get to that later. Next up is, I gotta admit, a violently weak one. This is one of my poorest picks of the day. I do not expect this one to fly, but let me explain what I almost picked. What I was considering doing is for Goblin Mage picking the Goblin Queen. I know she's a ruler, that's kind of crazy, but there's been a lot of talk going around about about rulers being reworked or possibly even removed. And if that did happen, this would be a perfect place to slot in the Goblin Queen. However, I didn't want to count on that, so I picked the best option I could, the Goblin Demolisher. I know He's not magical whatsoever, but I mean, he would work so well as a blaster or like maybe an assassin, but both of those were taken. Oh my gosh. Man, I do not feel so good about this one. The only magical part about him is how he can carry so many sticks of dynamite, dude. Ooh, Goblin Curse. That's an interesting idea. I'll get to spells later. I'm going to talk a little bit about spells. So that is a good concept. Good call-outs from chat. Anyways, we're on to Noble. For Noble Avengers, I picked the Little Prince. Now, the Little Prince himself is more of a ranged unit. He's like an air defense card. But I think he fits Avengers really well because of the Guardian. First of all, the Guardian's a girl. Shout out. Second of all, when he got below a certain health threshold, he would be similar to the Archer Queen, but with a lot less health, I guess. So it would be harder to get him in that pocket of health where he would activate his ability. But when that happened, he would spawn the Guardian, knock things back, very similar to the regular game. But it would be like good utility as an Avenger because it would keep the Little Prince alive. And the Little Prince is the actual Avenger. The Guardian's basically like a dummy that can attack. She doesn't have traits or benefit from them, is the vision I had in mind. And then Noble Mage, I made a little bit of an interesting play, but I went with the Magic Archer. The Magic Archer is a shoo-in for Mage trait because he has magic in his name. But the thing is, he could also fly as a Ranger super easily because he uses a bow. Now, he made a lot of sense in Ace Mage, so that was probably a slightly better pick, but the Mother Witch was kind of left hanging and I didn't have another pick, so whatever. So sad. Anyways, we're on to Undead, the last trait in the box. Now, for Undead Blasters, we're bringing back the GOAT. Let's go! Dude, I want Bomber back so bad, dude. So bad! I'm so excited for him to come back very soon. My absolute GOAT. Holy man, he's so good. Jeez. Yeah, I'm really excited for the Bomber to come back. Anyways, that was obviously an easy pick. Undead Mage. Bear with me here, but for my last troop, this is the last lot. For Undead Mage, what I'm actually going to do is move a troop. I'm going to move the Witch to kind of fit the magic users in Mage theme. The Witch and Wizards thing that I have going on. So I'm going to move the troop, the Witch, to Mage. And now for the actual last troop, for Undead Avengers, you need something that's going to survive, that's going to tank for a long time. So I picked the Skeletons. Okay, wait. You may say they die so easy. That's a terrible pick. But hear me out. The way the Skeletons work in the regular game, the way they get the most value, other than being a distraction card, is if they're being tanked for. So having them as an Avenger kind of emphasizes that gameplay style in regular Clash where you try and tank for the Skeletons so they get more value. Just having one Skeleton by himself who maybe got more value the longer they lived, like maybe an increased hit speed, like a solo Ranger or something, or maybe he multiplied like the Evo Skeletons, could be super interesting. And I tried to make parallels in all of my predictions between regular Clash Royale and Merge Tactics, because the easier it is to transition between the two, the better I think the game will do. So that is what I would expect them to do. Anyways, shout out Larry. He will be back later. Spoiler alert. Let's focus, gang. Let's focus. Let's get into it. Let's get into the big stuff. The elephant in the room, the new teaser that Clash Royale posted today. Man, blew my mind, to be honest. I had no expectation of it happening. Now, if you haven't seen the new teaser yet, here it is. I will show you right now. This was the post they made. What do these have in common? Any guesses? Any guesses, chat? And before you guess, we're not getting new Evos for all of them. That's what I thought too. I asked Supercell. They said no. Just kidding. I'm not in the creator chat. But yeah, that's not it. Okay. What it actually is, the thing they all have in common, and 10 points if you guessed, they all feature in this new deck I made today, which I will use to win a game in real life. That is not a joke. That is something I'm going to do. That might be a really bad idea, but I don't know. This deck looks pretty strong, so I'm going to try this out later today, I think, on stream. But actually, besides that, they have two things in common. Number one is that they're all buildings, and number two is that they're coming to merge tactics, according to that little thumbnail in the bottom right, or whatever you call it. Anyways, I'm going to talk about buildings in general, and then I'm going to talk about them in order. Except I'm not going to talk about them in order at all. Keep up, chat. It's going to be not in order. Just whatever. I mean, you guys got to roll with the punches here a little bit. Come on. Be flexible. Be flexible. But yeah, the addition of buildings begs a lot of questions. The first question I had was, are there going to be more swarm units in the game? Because these are all single target buildings, so swarm units would be very strong counters to them, especially the eye tower. And there's no bomb tower. However, I don't know if that warrants adding more swarm units, but I'm going to talk more about that a little bit later. The next question I had was, will there be more building targeting units in the game introduced? Now, I have to say that I expect not, because the way the benefit of building targeting units in Clash Royale is because they work well as win conditions, but without the need for a win condition like that, it's not as helpful to have your troops bypass other troops. So the way I thought about it next was, what if the troops were able to just bypass and they targeted buildings first? However, I also think that's kind of a bad idea because, and it's honestly a pretty simple reason, if a whole row is filled, your troops can't get around, and when your troops can't get to the thing they're pathfinding to in merge tactics, they just stand there. And let me tell you how tilted I would be if my freaking hog rider or whatever was just standing there in the middle of the board doing nothing when I was getting sniped by an X-bow. Man, I would be mad. So I don't think they're going to add that. The next question I had, is, are they going to add a building trait? Now, I see a world where the answer is no, where you're only allowed to have one building on the board, for example. What if you're only allowed to have one? Like maybe if your first hand was always 3 buildings and you got to pick out of one of them, and maybe it couldn't cost elixir, not take up a slot, so you're basically working with a free building in the middle of the board that didn't take up a troop slot the whole game. It wouldn't be mergeable in this case, but since they introduced 5 of them at once, I don't honestly expect that to be the case. I expect it to be its own trait. I expect you to be able to put multiple different buildings on the board and merge them, of course. However, it still could be interesting, I think, to have a building be your first hand every game guaranteed. It would kind of mitigate the frustrating factors of RNG. And if they had a trait to that building, it would be interesting to try and build your comp around it. And maybe you're only able to, like, roll a building in the shop when you don't have a building on the board. So you would have to sell it and then kind of roll for another one, take that risk. That's very on brand, I feel like. And yeah, my final question is, are they going to be mergeable? Obviously, if you have one on the board all game, maybe not. But I expect yes, except for one of them. One of them, I think, might not be mergeable, even if all the rest are. And I will get to that very briefly. Hold up. Before I start talking about the pump, which I have a lot to say about the pump, I'm going to try and predict the traits, the range, and the function of every building. And this, thinking about this gave me one more question, actually, that I want to mention, because it was kind of funny. Before I get to the pump, what happens if you have 2 buildings at the end of the game and they're out of range of each other? Like, what would happen? Would they just sit there? I mean, the thing is, they have a mechanic in the game already added in case this happens, but would you have to just wait for the clock to run out? Or, would it just automatically skip the rest of the time and deal 1 health each? Or you have a troop on the board, I guess, with the building, so would you deal 2 health each? Would there be, like, strategic moments where it's better to not go building so that you don't risk trading health with your opponent? Man, it's going to be a strategic nightmare. And then, obviously, the most obvious solution would be they would still have, like, the full board of range. Like, they could just target anywhere on the board. That could definitely happen, but I'm not going to predict for that because that's freaking lame. Anyways, now we're going to talk about the pump. The reason I wanted to talk about the pump first is because I think it's going to be by far the most impactful of the buildings. Now, there's a few ways implementing the pump could go. I'm going to start with the absolute worst case. The most boring one is if they were just teasing, bringing back the Elixir Collector modifier, which was in the game a couple seasons ago. But since they added the new card art, the art that's on screen, and it's yellow, ew, look at that color. Anyways, since they added new card art, I don't expect that to be the case. I expect it to be buyable. Now, the other ones are more realistic, more interesting, and both cases it would be buyable from the shop, which fits having the card art. Number one, I think that was unlikely, by the way. Number one is it's buyable, but it stays on your bench. So it would take up a slot on your bench. It would be really similar to the way the Elixir Collector modifier worked. And then you could sell it at any time to cash in on Elixir. The thing is, since you have the choice to buy it, I think it would be more like reasonable for it to cost a little bit more Elixir than it currently, or than it was sold for in Season 1, I guess. Okay, I don't really know how to explain it, but I think it would have to cost like, what, 4 Elixir or something? I don't know. I haven't thought it through. Anyways, the second option I think is the most interesting is what if it was on the board? But the question is, it begs the question, what is the price you have to pay for the better eco? And I don't mean an Elixir cost. What is the price you're paying? What is the trade-off? Is the trade-off just that you have to give up a troop slot? Like, you have to keep one of your troops as the Elixir pump if you want to be able to get that better eco? Maybe it would only have the building trait, or maybe it would have no traits, so there's no benefit, and you're just sacrificing an entire slot. Maybe you only got Elixir if it survived, like if you played in Season 1, the Just Keep Living modifier, you would try and keep this dummy alive to get a little bit of Elixir, so maybe that's how it would work. But there's just so many questions. How much Elixir is it going to give you? Is it going to increase the amount of Elixir it gives you every round you keep it on the board? Is it going to be the most broken troop and trait ever added? Is it going to make goblins completely obsolete? I have the answer to none of these questions. But, man, I am a little worried. I can't even lie. But, alas, I will get to that. But before I get to the rest of the buildings, there is a big problem. And that problem is the building trait going to be primary or secondary? Because here's the thing. Some traits, the most natural option would be for it to be a primary trait, and some troops, buildings, it would be more natural for it to be secondary, which you'll see in a second. But just for the sake of being most likely to get correct predictions, I'm going to allow for both. But I don't know. It kind of throws a wrench in the buildings trait system, I guess. I don't know. It'd be a hard problem to work around, frankly. Anyways, the first one we're going to handle is my beloved Expo, which I predict would be building Rangers traits. I think it would cost 5 Elixir because it would be very good for consistent damage. That's what I think Expo is good for, especially on defense. So I think a 5 Elixir cost is pretty balanced. I would have it have a 4-tile range, so you could put it in the back row and snipe out opposing troops. It would be very strong for that. But if you wanted it to target any troops outside of the front line, it would get targeted before your other backline troops. So if your opponent, say, moved all their troops back 1 unit, then you would have to move your Expo up 1 row, and then it would get targeted before, say, a princess. So it makes it like tank, as I think a building should. Oh my gosh, dude. I'm not even going to repeat what I just read in chat. What are we doing? What are we talking about? 6-7 trait? No. Guys, let's lock in. Mortar. It's time for Mortar. Mortar, I estimated building Blasters would be the closest. But I also heard somebody say building Noble, and that's a very interesting concept as well. If I had to guess, I would probably expect it to be a secondary trait rather than a primary trait. But I don't know. I thought Blasters fit the best. I think the Mortar would be a 2-cost troop, and it would have a 6-tile range. So it would work very similar to how it does in regular Clash. Like, how you would imagine it, I guess. It would target your opponent's backline, and it could do that in a couple of ways. It could either target back to front, like in reverse, or it could have a gap in its range close to it, like the Mortar does in regular Clash Royale. And the reason it would be 2 cost, the reason I think that's fair, is because I would have it attack very, like, infrequently if I were to put it into the game. try and make it relatively balanced. But with Blaster's trait, it's very nice because the farther you are from something, the more damage you do. So it would be a very good like synergy there. Also, I forgot to mention the Expo synergy with Rangers seems pretty clear to me. It would build up very fast. Tesla is electric. Spoiler alert. I don't know if that's a surprise to anyone, but yeah, I was thinking 3 elixir cost and a 3 tile range. So you would play in front of your other rangers. And the reason for that is because the ability that I'm imagining is every few seconds or maybe every couple of hits it gets, it would go underground for a second, and all the troops that were attacking it would walk away and retarget onto something else. And then the Tesla would pop back up and it would be being tanked for by other troops. So it would kind of screw over your backline, but it would also stay alive longer. So it would be like a pretty selfish troop. But yeah, I'm going to talk more about retargeting mechanics when we get there. And finally, the I Tower, obviously fire building trait. And I was thinking 4 cost because of the utility that you get out of DPSing tanky troops down like that. And 2 or 3 tile range. I was leaning towards 2 for similar reasoning to the Inferno Dragon that I said earlier. But obviously it would have stackable damage, and the fire trait works very well with that. The thing is, there's not a lot of swarm units, so it would be pretty strong, which means you have to implement some way to reset it. And I was thinking doing that with stuns. Implementing a reset mechanic with stuns and maybe also electric attacks, because if it's just stuns, then Juggernauts would be OP, because Juggernauts stop you from being stunned. So you could just put an I Tower behind a Juggernaut, and then it would infinitely stack on whatever it was targeting. So I definitely think that we need a reset mechanic if we're going to add things with stacking damage like the I Tower. And it would also be really cool, in my opinion, if you could reset stuff like Rangers and have them start their build-up over again. I think that would be really cool. And I also think stunning attacks and maybe electric attacks should retarget troops. Like in regular Clash, that's how they work. And with retargeting, what I'm imagining is it just like, it would only really have effect if things were equal distance. So usually it's when it's next to each other. So it would be a lot more intuitive for Rangers. The thing is, if it was with melee troops, it would be really a little bit unintuitive, because if you don't know, the way targeting works in Merge Tactics is the order in which it's decided is based on what your opponent bought first, which you obviously can't tell most of the time, unless you're like constantly checking. So it would be a little bit unintuitive to have it behave that way. Maybe we would have some mechanic that showed targeting priority. The best idea I had was, you know, when you click a troop and it shows their stats, I was imagining that it could have, when you open that click in menu and you also look at your opponent's troops, it would show what each of your troops is going to target, like the order in which it's going to target your enemy's troops with like a gradient of some kind. The thing is, I think those mechanics are a little too deep to realistically be implemented, because like once something gets retargeted, it'll start targeting something else. And then like, obviously, but at that point you just know what it's going to target. But yeah, the only thing that I do think we should take away from that is I think it would be pretty cool if you automatically could see your enemy's troops while you were building your comp, instead of having to switch into another menu. I know that makes it like a little too easy and removes skill, but I also think that it would be worth it because people would play more around positioning and care more about positioning, so the game would like reach a higher level of strategy in that regard. So I honestly think that would be worth it. Anyways, now that I've talked about all this nonsense, I'm going to think about some other card concepts that I thought of. And the first one is the Dark Prince, by the way. First of all, I didn't think through all the cards in the game. These are just the ones that came to mind while I was brainstorming. But yeah, the Dark Prince seems pretty simple to implement. He would have splash damage like the Skeleton King in the same kind of effect radius. He would obviously do less damage. But the main mechanic of him that I think would actually be super cool to implement would be his shield, which would be especially good against like high damaging units like a P.E.K.K.A. or potentially a Sparky. And he would be super good in the one punch modifier, so people would want to go for the Dark Prince for that reason. And I was thinking maybe a dark trait would also be interesting to implement. like with the Night Witch, and there's a bunch of Dark Elixir stuff in regular Clash, so yeah, I think that would be super interesting. Anyways, the shield mechanic could also be implemented with things like guards, but that begs the question, of course, swarm units. Which swarm units should be added? The thing is, stuff like the Skarmy, I think that would be too oppressive. The Goblin Gang. Guards would be interesting. Maybe having one guard would be more realistic for like 2 elixir, or maybe even 1 elixir. And having 1 elixir skeletons would be super interesting. Especially if you paid 1 elixir and you got 3 skeletons, or maybe 2 elixir for 3 skeletons, and they were super like low health, but they were like distraction units basically, which relates to the next topic that I'm going to talk about actually. So I am going to get to that briefly, but first I'm going to talk about the spirits and the reason I implemented them the way that I did with assassins. It's a little complicated, bear with me here. I envisioned the spirits taking up 0 troop slots. So they would cost like 1 elixir or something. And then when you buy them, you still place them on the board, but they're so like unimpactful that they don't take up a troop slot. And then they would like jump at the start of the round. They would have their thing, so they wouldn't be that impactful. They would be most useful for the traits that they had, which is why I made them assassins. Now, think about it this way with me. They're adding a new trait in buildings. It's almost guaranteed. So eventually, since they're adding a new trait now, they're going to be adding more new traits. They're going to need to rework the thresholds at which boosts occur. What I mean by that is, in Season 1, like Rangers, you needed 3 troops, and now you need 2 or 4 because they added more. Right now, all the troop thresholds are even numbers. And since they're adding more troops, eventually you're going to have like 8 of some troops. So level 2, 4, 6, and 8, like 4 stages of upgrades, would be interesting to mess with. But what I'm more hoping for is a level 3 and a level 6, or a 3 troop and 6 troop modifier for some traits. And I think that would fit really well for stuff like Rangers, because Rangers used to be that way, so reverting it would be like a pretty good nerf. And the same thing goes for Assassins. I think that fits Assassins really well. Making Assassins more of a commitment, I think, is a good balance. And that's why I think the Spirits would be good Assassins. I finally got to it. Because they would enable your other troops to jump to that back line without taking up a troop slot, even though they themselves don't do that much impact. Now, I did have another idea for Spirits, to use them as a Spirit trio. Now, I gotta be honest, when I was thinking about this, I forgot the Heal Spirit existed. But it would happen once per round, like the Spirits I was thinking about before, but instead of being 3 separate spirits, you'd be able to buy all of them and put them all on the same tile. So since they don't have a lot of impact and they like fall off on impact like really quickly, you would basically be sacrificing a slot in your team for 3 traits. You would get electric, you would get fire, and you would get ice, which the next trait that I'm predicting is the ice trait. The thing is, it's such an easy shoe-in as a 2-troop trait with these 2 troops. Obviously, the Ice Wiz would make an easy mage. Ice Wiz, sorry. It would make an easy mage, and I think there's a lot of potential for, like, reworking the mage to be a 3 out of 3 thing. Or maybe have a 2 out of 3 and a 3 out of 3 level. I don't think that's, like, outrageous, because that's a significant difference in commitment. I think that could be interesting. And then the Ice Golem, I did really like the idea of having a low damage but more tanky brawler, because again, none of the brawlers really focus on a tanky role, and buffing off his health would make him like extremely strong. It would like harken back to peak brawlers, which if you haven't seen my short on that, it was a really good one. Watch that. But of course, since he's usually a tanky unit, he would make a very good Juggernaut. And the ice ability would just be extremely similar to the regular Clash Royale. It would slow troops' movement speed by a lot, and their hit speed as well. Now, I do have another idea for the ice trait, but I'll get to that in a second. Another card that I could do. I'll get to it. The next troop that I thought of was the Lumberjack, because he would be like a classic high DPS squishy troop, and then when he died, he would drop Rage, really similar to how he does in the regular game, buff up the rest of your troops. But now that we're talking about Rage, we gotta open Pandora's box here and talk about spells in Merge Tactics. Now, the thing is, spells are a very hotly contested topic. Nobody knows how they would be implemented, but I think I've got a couple good ideas here. Now, the first idea is to just buy a spell every time you want to use it, and you can maybe use max 1 per round. So you can roll them in the shop, and you can, like, if you don't have one for that round, you can roll it in the shop and you can buy it. Or the other thing I was thinking is to have one of each shop card or spell card in the pool. So essentially you would get one per player. Every player would only get one spell every game. So they would have to like scramble for the spell they wanted. And obviously you wouldn't be able to promote to those spells. They would have different prices, but you wouldn't be able to promote to them and you wouldn't be able to echo them. So you can't merge them either, obviously. They wouldn't take up a troop slot, but since you can only get one, you could sell and cycle because the other spells wouldn't show up in your shop while you had a spell on the board. Now, the way I envision this working is it would show you what tile on the enemy's side of the board you were targeting with the spell every round, and you could like move it around like a normal trait. And then once the round started, it would have a one-time effect. It would just do the impact of the spell for a certain duration. It might not have to be at the very start of the round, though. I was thinking maybe it could be interesting to have it a bit delayed into the round. But yeah, now I find myself pressed to talk about a very important topic to the game, I feel like, which is monetization. Merge Tactics is in a very awkward spot monetization-wise. The thing is, it is also in a very beautiful place because it's not pay-to-win whatsoever. Besides the 2% difference that you get from levels, and even that is very rarely impactful. So it's very nice. We're in a beautiful stage of the game with no monetization, but the thing is, I like the cosmetics monetization system, but that's just not going to be sustainable for Supercell. And I would rather, sue me for saying this, but I would rather Supercell make Merge Tactics pay to win than to let it die. I would rather have to be a little better at the game to beat brain-dead pay-to-win players and never have a chance to get to the top of the leaderboard ever again, if that's the price I have to pay for Supercell committing to this game. And the simplest, most obvious way that they could monetize the game is through EVOs. They wouldn't even have to implement anything except for the EVOs themselves. Now, I know, I hear you. It would be revolting. It would be horrible. It would not be fun to deal with at all. But it would keep the game alive. Now, the thing about EVOs is they could straight up work the same system that they do to unlock EVOs in the regular game. So when you unlocked EVOs, it would still be interactive with regular Clash Royale because that meshing, I think, is helpful for them. And you'd be able to use the EVOs you already had. So it's not the end of the world. Now, there's a couple of ideas I had about how to implement EVOs themselves. The EVO, usually in regular Clash Royale, the way you get to the EVO version is you have to play a card a certain amount of times. So instead of amount of times played, maybe it could be every so often rounds-wise. Like, every round you keep the troop on the board, it counts as a cycle. So for like a 3-cycle evolution or something, or there's no 3-cycle evolution. For a 2-cycle evolution, like say the baby dragon, you would put it in for one round, it wouldn't do anything, and then you would use the EVO version the second time. Or the other option that I had was to make it like a purchase-based system. So, because right now you buy 2 of the same troop to get it to 2 stars, but maybe if you had the EVO version like unlocked, or if you were using it, you could buy 3 of the same troop. And if you like put them next to each other or something, instead of saving your other troop, it would change it into the EVO version. So it would basically cost an extra troop to be able to use the EVO version at that star level. So it would just be more expensive by what? Double? 1.5 times? I don't know. Anyways, I also thought it might be interesting to play with the idea of enabling which EVOs are active instead of just having all of your EVOs unlocked. Being able to pick 1 or 2 EVOs, maybe 3, 4, 5, I don't know. But being able to pick a few EVOs that you have potential to use in game would be really interesting, because based on my understanding, Clash Mini was more of a deck building focused version of this game, and Merge Tactics hasn't really implemented any of that deck building aspect yet. And I think that could be a really interesting way to, like, get into it. Because the thing is, I think that the strategizing outside of the game is an area where they can really expand merge tactics. Because right now, the extent of that is picking your ruler and kind of figuring out what comps you might want to go for. But the thing is, that's generally a worse strategy. So I think it would be cool if Supercell rewarded players thinking about the game before they hopped into matches like they do with regular Clash Royale. But that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think. If you are watching this on YouTube, drop your ideas, your predictions in the comments so you can tell everyone, including me, that you called it. That you signed it in blood, wrote your name down, and saw it coming. But yeah, if you're here live, shout out to you. Thanks for showing up. If you want to be a part of stuff like this, I'm going to be doing more streamed events in the near term. Then yeah, hang out in my live stream. It's pretty fun. We're chill. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, I would much appreciate it if you subscribed, but only do it if I deserve it. Of course, I don't want to force you into it if it's not worth your time. So thanks for watching. Appreciate you being here. That's it for me.